When I first moved into the house with my partner, Renee, I didn't think much of the calendar on the wall. It was an old thing. Yellowed edges. Thick paper. Each month had fading sketches of wildflowers, nothing ominous about it. Except, someone had marked 3 days. Not birthdays. Not holidays. Just 3 days. And under each one, in faded red ink, the same note. Don't go out. We might have never noticed it if we hadn't moved in during early February. Cold air. Quiet skies. A perfect time to settle in without breaking a sweat. We stepped through the heavy oak front door, excited, exhausted, and hopeful. We paused in the living room, empty except for dust and echoes, when Renee stopped and squinted across the room. Wait, was that there before? She asked. I followed her gaze to the wall opposite. That's when I saw it. The calendar. I shrugged. Don't think so. Maybe the previous owners forgot it. She walked over. Her tired body dragged across the wooden floor. Then she stopped, raised her hand, pointed. Look, she said softly. That date. It's marked. February 6th, circled in what looked like deep maroon, almost like dried blood. I leaned in, peering at the faint words written just beneath it. Don't go out, I read aloud. Renee raised an eyebrow. Creepy joke? Maybe, I said. Maybe it's just someone messing around. A kid. She flipped through the rest of the calendar, and my chest grew tight. 2 more red circles. 1 in June. 1 in September. Always the same note beneath. Don't go out. We stared at it for a long time. Renee looked over at me, clearly unsettled. Do we take it down? Not yet, I said, surprising myself. Let's just leave it for now. She didn't argue. We were too tired to dig deeper that night. We hauled our suitcases upstairs, collapsed into the master bedroom, and fell asleep in our coats. But the next morning, I found Renee sitting in the living room, legs crossed on the couch the movers had dropped off, her eyes fixed on the calendar like it had started speaking to her. She was scribbling something into her notepad, lips moving slightly. You okay? I asked. She looked up at me and smiled. Yeah, just trying to figure it out. She had already searched for a connection between the 3 dates. No major events. No local news. No folklore. Nothing. Renee always loved a mystery, but I hadn't seen her like this before. This wasn't curiosity. This was obsession. I sat beside her and looked at her notes. Time zones, lunar phases, astrological charts. She'd mapped out every detail, trying to find a pattern. But nothing fit. Still, she pressed on. And as February 6th crept closer, her mood shifted. She became quieter, more serious. And one day, she turned to me and said, I want us to stay inside that day. I blinked. You believe it? I don't know what I believe, she whispered, but I don't want to find out the hard way. And maybe, deep down, I agreed. So we did. We stayed home. Curtains drawn. Phones off. Lights low. Renee called it our neighborhood watch. We moved the couch near the big window overlooking the front lawn and sat there all day. At first, it felt silly. Harmless. Like we were kids telling ghost stories under a blanket. But then the hours passed, and the street outside stayed empty. Too empty. We talked quietly, trying to keep things normal. We reminisced about college, about our first apartment, about the time our car broke down and we laughed in the rain. But around 4 p.m., the world shifted. Across the street, our neighbor, Mr. Jensen, stepped outside. He was tall, in his 60s. Always wore a beige cardigan and smoked too many cigarettes. We had introduced ourselves once. He was polite, but distant. We watched as he lit a cigarette and brought it to his lips. And then, he vanished. No sound, no warning. Just gone. The cigarette remained. Floating. Burning. The ember pulsed like a heartbeat in midair. I gasped. Renee clutched my hand so tight it hurt. And then, as if time rewound itself, Mr. Jensen was standing there again, cigarette between his fingers, eyes blank, like nothing had happened. We stared in silence. Finally, Renee whispered, Did you see that? I nodded. I couldn't speak. We turned away from the window and didn't look out again for the rest of the night. That evening, we barely moved. No dinner. No TV. We sat there, staring at the walls, waiting for the day to end. When it finally did, we decided we needed to ask the Jensens what happened. We needed to know. So the next morning, we crossed the street and knocked. Mrs. Jensen answered. Sweet woman. Always wore blue house dresses. She smiled at us, too wide, and said, Well, this is a surprise. Come on in, kids. Behind her, Mr. Jensen stood still, watching us from the hallway. His face calm. Too calm. Renee stepped forward. Mrs. Jensen, we were wondering if your husband went outside yesterday? Mrs. Jensen's smile didn't fade, but her eyes did something strange. They flickered. Oh no, dear, she said gently. You must be mistaken. My husband never left the house. She turned her head. Bill, would you check the soup on the stove? Mr. Jensen nodded and disappeared down the hallway. And then Mrs. Jensen leaned in. Her voice dropped to a hiss. The whispers will get you, she said. Leave before they do, or it'll be too late. We froze. Before we could reply, Mr. Jensen returned. Everything all right? He asked, voice cheery. You two want some soup? It'll warm you right up. We declined. Politely. Quickly. And we left. That night, their house glowed with strange lights. Every window shimmered on and off, like a warning signal in Morse code. Then they went out. And stayed out. We never saw Mrs. Jensen again. The days after Mrs. Jensen disappeared were filled with a strange kind of silence. Not the peaceful, suburban kind. No chirping birds. No lawnmowers. No delivery trucks humming past the windows. Just quiet. Too quiet. Renee didn't say much after that visit. I'd find her awake at night, sitting upright in bed, her eyes fixed on the darkened window. She wasn't scared exactly. It was more like she was listening for something. Something we couldn't yet hear. I tried to brush it off. I told myself the Jensens were just weird. Maybe they moved. Maybe she was sick. Maybe the lights flickering that night were just bad wiring. But then Renee said something that made me feel cold all over. They don't want us to leave. Her voice was flat. Matter of fact. Not dramatic, not fearful. Just certain. I laughed nervously. You mean the neighbors? She shook her head. Not the neighbors. She wouldn't say more after that. And I didn't push her. But one night, maybe 2 weeks after the calendar's first marked date had passed, I found her standing at the front door. It was locked, but her hand was resting on the knob. The porch light glowed faintly behind the frosted glass. Renee? I whispered. She turned slowly. Her face was pale, her lips trembling. I didn't hear anything, she said, like she was trying to convince herself. But I wanted to go out. I took her hand gently and led her back to bed. Neither of us slept. We started researching. Not just about the house, but the whole street. We looked up property records, tried to trace previous owners, filed public records requests. Everything came back. Normal. Uncomfortably normal. No strange deaths. No fires. No missing persons. No Mrs. Jensen in the public record. Just one name. William Jensen. Owner for 37 years. Unmarried. Every time we found something that didn't match what we remembered, Renee would circle it in red marker. Our printouts began to look like the calendar. Circles. Warnings. Little handwritten notes beneath them. Don't trust what you saw. Don't believe the dates. Don't go out. By May, Renee had stopped going to work. She said the whispers were starting. I hadn't heard them. Not yet. But I saw what they were doing to her. She'd pace the hallway in the middle of the night. Stand in front of the door. Sometimes she'd hum a tune I didn't recognize, her fingers twitching like she was conducting an invisible orchestra. Then she'd snap out of it, always confused, always frightened. She'd beg me to sell the house. And I tried. I listed it online. Called realtors. But somehow, no one followed up. No emails. No visits. Even our listings kept disappearing. It was like the house refused to let go. And then, the calendar reminded us. June 19th. The second date. Marked in that same red ink. That same message. Don't go out. We didn't speak much that week. Renee was quieter than ever. The humming stopped. The pacing stopped. She stayed in bed most of the time, staring at the ceiling, blinking as if she was watching something move across it. She said the whispers were getting clearer. She said they were saying her name now. I held her, soothed her, told her she was safe. But I was lying. I didn't believe she was safe anymore. That night, the 18th, we locked every window, bolted every door, drew the curtains. I made tea, lit candles. Anything to make it feel like a normal evening. But the air in the house felt heavy, like it was pressing down on our lungs. Around midnight, the whispers came. I still couldn't hear them, but Renee sat up in bed. Her hands trembled. Her eyes went wide, glassy, like someone had dialed her to another frequency. She whispered, "They want me to see." I held her face in my hands. See what? But she didn't answer. Just stood up, walked to the front door. No, I said. Not tonight. Renee, not tonight. She turned to me slowly. Her expression was strange. Blank. Not afraid. Not angry. Just gone. They said it's beautiful, she whispered. They said I'll understand when I see it. I tried to block the door. I really did. But she was stronger. She always had been. She pushed past me, unlatched the lock, and stepped outside. And just like that, she disappeared. She flickered like bad reception. 1 second there. The next gone. Not like she ran away. Not like she was taken. She ceased. And my knees buckled. I stayed there on the floor, gasping, praying she would come back. And then she did. Just like Mr. Jensen had. One moment she was gone. Then she was inside again. Standing next to me. No sound. No warning. Just there. She looked down at me, smiling. But her eyes weren't hers. Renee always smiled with her whole face. This one didn't reach past her lips. Her voice came next. Calm. Cheerful. I saw it, she said. It's more than I imagined. She touched my cheek. Her hand was warm, but it didn't feel like her. And when I asked her what she saw, she just said one word. Home. Then she turned and walked down the hallway. Left me there. Alone. Terrified. And even though I lived with her, ate with her, slept next to her every night after that, I never truly felt like Renee came back. I wish I could say I adjusted. I wish I could lie and say things went back to normal after June 19th. But they didn't. Whatever walked back through that door, it wore Renee's skin. But it didn't move like her. Didn't speak like her. Didn't sleep like her. It was in the little things at first. She'd forget how to make her favorite tea. Renee used to make it every night with 2 spoons of honey and a drop of lemon. But now, she'd just boil water, then stare at it like she forgot why she started. Sometimes, she'd serve it cold, untouched. Other times, she'd give it to me with nothing in the cup at all. And then there were the questions. She'd ask me things Renee already knew. Like, what's your middle name again? Or, do you sleep on the left or right side? At first, I thought maybe the trauma had scrambled something inside her. But soon I realized, this wasn't confusion. This was curiosity. She wasn't forgetting me. She was studying me. Every day, every hour, she'd watch me like I was a stranger in her house. One evening, I caught her standing in the hallway, just outside our bedroom, whispering to the wall. Her back was turned, her hands hanging at her sides. When I spoke her name, she didn't flinch. She just kept whispering, over and over. I crept closer, close enough to hear it. She was repeating my name, over and over. And then she laughed. A soft, breathy laugh I'd never heard come from her before. When she turned around, her smile was wide, too wide. And her eyes. God, her eyes. They were wrong. Glassy. Hungry. But she spoke like nothing was off. Just thinking about you, she said. I barely slept that night. I kept the door locked. I placed a chair against the knob. I know it sounds paranoid, but when someone you love looks at you like you're a meal, you trust your instincts. The next morning, she was waiting for me at the kitchen table, smiling. 2 mugs of tea sat between us. I made it just the way you like, she said. But when I looked inside the cup, it was empty. No water. No steam. Just a dry mug. I didn't drink it. I pretended to. And she just watched. Over the next few weeks, things escalated. I started to hear tapping inside the walls. Not rats. Not plumbing. Tapping. Rhythmic. Deliberate. Always 3 taps. Pause. 3 more. And every time I looked at Renee, she'd be smiling. Like she already knew what I'd heard. She'd hum strange tunes. Low, winding melodies that made my skin crawl. She'd leave the front door unlocked. I'd find it wide open some mornings, cold air spilling into the foyer. When I asked why she left it open, she just said, in case they want to come in. I stopped going to work. I stopped answering texts. I was unraveling. But I didn't leave. Why? Because despite all of it, a tiny part of me believed the woman I loved was still somewhere inside that thing. And if I left her here alone, that tiny part might disappear forever. One night, I caught her drawing in her notebook, the same one she used to research the calendar. The pages used to be filled with dates, scribbled questions, newspaper clippings. Now, they were covered in circles, overlapping, uneven, drawn with frantic pressure. Some had nails embedded in the paper like she'd stabbed it repeatedly with her pen. And in the middle of every circle, she'd written one word. Return. I took the notebook when she wasn't looking and hid it. That night, she stood over the bed for nearly an hour while I pretended to sleep. I felt her breath on my face. Felt her fingers brush the edge of my blanket. But she never touched me, never spoke. When I opened my eyes, she was gone. In the morning, the front door was open again. I found muddy footprints in the living room. And they weren't hers. They were barefoot, larger than mine, and wet, dripping wet. I followed them to the kitchen, where they stopped at the table. Renee was sitting there, smiling. Her hands were perfectly dry. She said nothing. I didn't ask. I couldn't. That same afternoon, I found the calendar again. We had stored it in the attic after June. I thought maybe if we got rid of it, this would stop. But there it was, tacked back onto the wall in the living room. Same markings, same red circles. And the final date loomed closer now. September 21st. Beneath it, for the first time, a new line of text had appeared. I didn't write it, I swear. But it was in Renee's handwriting. And it said, "This is when it ends." I tore the calendar down, but the message was already burned into me. Something was coming. And this time, I wasn't sure I'd survive it. By September, the air inside the house felt thicker than the air outside. Heavier. Slower. Like the walls were breathing, each inhale stealing a little more of my will to fight. Renee had stopped pretending. She no longer made tea. No longer asked questions. No longer smiled like she used to. She wandered the halls like she was waiting for something, listening for it. And whatever it was, I could feel it too, crawling beneath the floorboards, murmuring through the cracks in the ceiling. Whispers. And now, I could hear them. At first, just in dreams. A hum behind my thoughts. Then clearer. Louder. Coherent. They didn't speak like voices do. They slid into the mind. Slippery. Quiet. Absolute. They said things like, "She chose us. You will follow. The door is almost ready." I stopped eating. I barely slept. My eyes stung with the strain of always watching her. Always waiting for her to make her move. But she didn't need to, because the house already had. I'd wake up to find furniture rearranged. Books stacked in circles on the floor. All the clocks stopped at 3:21 a.m., the same time every night. One morning, I found our wedding photo cracked in half on the nightstand. The part with Renee's face had been burned. But the most disturbing thing? She acted like she didn't see any of it. As if the couch hadn't moved. As if the photos weren't slashed. As if the clocks all kept ticking like nothing had happened. And when I confronted her, she tilted her head, like she didn't understand the language I was speaking. Then she'd say something like, "You'll love it on the other side." I stopped calling her Renee. Because she wasn't. The thing wearing her skin, sleeping in her bed, mimicking her voice, it was something else. I started keeping notes. Timelines. Trying to make sense of what the whispers wanted. But every time I wrote something down, it would vanish the next morning. My notebook was full of blank pages. And that's when I realized. It wasn't the house. It was the calendar. Every line of ink I put to paper, every time I tried to remember the days leading up to February 6th, June 19th, it all dissolved. The calendar wasn't just marking time. It was rewriting it. Rewriting me. So I took the pages Renee had filled, those circles with the word return scrawled in them, and I burned them. And for a moment, I thought it worked. The air lifted. The house quieted. Renee stopped staring at the corners of the ceiling. But then, something changed. The silence got worse. Heavier. Darker. Like I'd broken a rule I didn't know existed. That night, I woke up at 3:21 a.m. Every light in the house was on. Every door open. Renee was nowhere. Then I saw it. Out front. The lawn. Lit by the street lamp. A figure. Tall. Motionless. Facing the house. Not moving. Not blinking. Not human. I stood frozen at the window. And then it raised its arm. And pointed. Straight at me. I collapsed backward, heart punching my ribs. I scrambled away, breath caught in my throat. When I looked again, it was gone. But the whispers remained. Louder now. Furious. "You will not stop it. She chose the gate. The gate is you." I ran through the house, room to room, screaming her name. But Renee wasn't there. Then I found the basement door open. We never used the basement. It had always smelled of dust and rusted pipes. But now, it smelled like something dead. Something ancient. I stepped inside, 1 foot at a time. Descending. Each step groaned beneath my weight, like the house itself was warning me to turn back. At the bottom, nothing. Just cement floor. Cardboard boxes. Cobwebs. Until I saw her. Standing in the far corner. Face to the wall. Unmoving. "Renee," I whispered. She didn't turn. Didn't breathe. I reached out. And that's when she snapped around. But it wasn't her face anymore. It was empty. Her skin blank. No eyes. No nose. No mouth. Just a smooth, featureless mask of flesh. She tilted her head, and somehow I heard her voice. From inside my mind. You will follow me. I stumbled backward, nearly fell. When I looked again, she was gone. Nothing but shadows and cold. I ran up the stairs, slammed the basement door, locked it, and pushed a shelf against it for good measure. Then I ran to the calendar, still nailed to the wall, still counting down. September 21st, just 4 days away. The last marked day. And underneath, new words had appeared. Not written, not drawn, etched into the paper, as if clawed from beneath. Prepare the vessel. The sun didn't rise on the 21st. Or maybe it did, somewhere else. But not here. Not in this house. Outside, the sky held the color of wet ash. The street looked the same, but it wasn't. No wind. No birds. No distant hum of life. Just that thick, impossible stillness. Inside, every shadow looked alive. I hadn't slept the night before. How could I? The words on the calendar had shifted again. Opened the door. I stood staring at it, half expecting the letters to rearrange themselves while I watched. But they didn't need to. Because the real message wasn't written. It was crawling in my head. Every time I blinked, I saw her face, Renee's face, but twisted, blank, wide, patient, waiting for me. Because I was the last thing standing between this house and whatever it was trying to bring through. I tried to leave. God knows I tried. But the front door wouldn't open. The key snapped in the lock. The windows? Nailed shut from the outside. I even tried busting through the garage. But the concrete had split. The air beyond the threshold looked warped, like heat waves, but cold. And the whispers? They weren't whispers anymore. They were voices. Clear. Closer. Cutting through my thoughts like knives through silk. Let her in. The gate must open. You were the vessel. I didn't know what that meant. Not fully. But the basement, God help me, it was calling. At 3:21 p.m., every clock began to chime. All at once. Even the ones without batteries. Even the ones I'd smashed. The calendar fell from the wall, fluttering like a dying bird. I didn't want to go down those stairs. I didn't. But I did. Every step groaned like it remembered. At the bottom, the smell hit me first. Rot. Mold. Earth. And something else. Like wool soaked in meat. Then the light bulb overhead flickered once and went out. Darkness. But I wasn't alone. She was there. In the center of the basement. Back turned. Head tilted up like she was listening to something above her. I didn't speak. I didn't breathe. She began to turn. Slowly. And with each degree, I felt something inside me unravel. By the time she faced me fully, I understood. It wasn't Renee. It had never been Renee. Whatever came back after June 19th, it was just a mold. A hollow form. And now, it wanted to be filled. By me. Her voice slid into my mind like a splinter under a fingernail. You opened the house. You stayed through the signs. Now you complete the cycle. I wanted to run. I truly did. But my legs wouldn't move. She stepped forward, no footsteps, just appeared closer. And her face. Her face began to change. Not into mine. Not into Renee's. Into everyone. 1,000 flickering masks, smiling, screaming, silent. The walls around us pulsed like lungs. The floor quaked. In the far corner of the basement. It opened. Not like a door. More like a tear. A jagged wound in reality. And on the other side was not a place. It was a presence. Massive. Endless. Hungry. I was being pulled toward it. My skin tingled. My eyes watered. My heart threatened to burst. And through it all, her voice remained. Step through. Be made whole. I screamed. Not in defiance. In fear. Because some part of me wanted to. Some part of me believed that stepping through would mean peace. No more confusion. No more isolation. No more whispers. Just silence. And maybe that's what it wanted most. Willingness. Consent. I turned back toward the stairs. She was behind me now, blocking the way. Her hands reached out. And in them, our wedding rings. I hadn't even noticed mine was gone. She placed it back on my finger. Finish it. I closed my eyes. Felt the tear in the world pulling me backward. And I made a choice. When I woke, I was lying on the living room floor. Sunlight poured through the window. Birds chirped. Cars passed by outside. It was over? I blinked and looked around. No calendar. No Renee. No whispers. I stood, unsure if I dreamt the whole thing. And then I noticed something strange. On the wall, exactly where the calendar had been, were three small words carved into the plaster. You stepped back. I don't know what that means. Not fully. But sometimes, I'll be walking through the house and see something flicker in the corner of my eye. Or hear 3 taps at the window, even when I'm sure I'm alone. And every night, at exactly 3:21 a.m., I wake up without reason. Not afraid. Not anymore. But aware that something is still watching. Still waiting. Because I never destroyed the calendar. I never found where she hid it. And somewhere, far below the floorboards, the door is still open.